Let me start with a question that might feel uncomfortable, but it matters. What happens when someone grows up believing that pregnancy can just happen to them? Not through choice, not through an action they understand, but almost like a surprise decision made by someone else, by fate, by God, or by chance. For many people, that's not a hypothetical. That was their reality. And today we're going to talk about why incomplete sex education isn't just a knowledge gap. It's a health issue, a mental health issue, and in many cases a lifelong source of fear and confusion. We'll talk about what gets left out, why it matters, and how accurate, respectful education actually protects people instead of harming values. This isn't about attacking religion, it isn't about promoting sex, and it definitely isn't about shock value. This is about health, clarity, and truth. Because silence doesn't protect anyone. Education does. For generations, many well-meaning families and communities have tried to teach children about bodies, relationships, and reproduction while avoiding one key ingredient: clarity. The intention is often good: to preserve innocence, to uphold values, to delay adult topics until later. But when education becomes vague, symbolic, or incomplete, something dangerous happens. The brain fills in the gaps. And when the gaps involve the body, pregnancy, and sexuality, those imagined explanations can be far more frightening than the truth. I've heard from people who genuinely believed, well into adolescence, that pregnancy could occur simply because a higher power decided it should. That if they were good, nothing would happen, but if they were somehow flawed or sinful, their body might betray them. Think about the anxiety that creates. Imagine being 13 years old, lying awake at night, wondering if you might wake up pregnant, not because you did anything, but because you didn't fully understand how your body works. That isn't innocence, that's fear. So let's slow this down and talk about what complete, responsible sex education actually means. At its core, sex education is not about encouraging behaviour. It's about explaining biology, boundaries, cause and effect, and personal agency. It teaches one of the most important lessons a human being can learn. Your body is not mysterious or magical. It follows understandable rules, and knowing them gives you power. When education avoids explaining how pregnancy actually happens, it removes that power. It tells people, especially young people, that they don't need to understand their own bodies. And when people don't understand their bodies, they can't protect them. That's where unintended pregnancies happen. That's where shame grows. That's where misinformation spreads. Not because people are reckless, but because they were never properly informed. One of the most common patterns in incomplete sex education is what I call anatomy without action. You might hear accurate names for body parts. You might learn that sperm exists, or that eggs exist, or that babies grow in the uterus. But the moment when those facts need to connect, when cause becomes effect, everything suddenly goes quiet. The explanation skips from sperm exists to a baby begins. And that missing link matters more than anything else, because without it, people can't understand consent, contraception, fertility, or risk. They can't understand how pregnancy can be prevented or planned. And they certainly can't understand how sexual health decisions affect their future. Knowledge doesn't remove values. It supports informed choices. Let's talk about mental health for a moment because this is often overlooked. When young people are taught that pregnancy is mysterious, miraculous, or unpredictable, it can create a constant sense of vigilance. Their body becomes something that might betray them, something they don't control, something they fear. That fear doesn't disappear with age. It often turns into shame, anxiety around intimacy, difficulty communicating with partners, and even avoidance of medical care. People who grow up without clear sex education are statistically less likely to seek preventive health care. They're less likely to ask questions, less likely to advocate for themselves, less likely to understand what's normal and what isn't. That's not morality, that's a public health issue. Another critical piece that often gets lost is consent. You cannot fully teach consent without explaining sex. Consent isn't just about saying yes or no, it's about understanding what you are agreeing to. If someone doesn't understand how pregnancy happens, they cannot truly understand the consequences of sexual activity. And consent without understanding isn't real consent. Clear education empowers people to say no with confidence and yes with awareness. It teaches boundaries, responsibility, and respect. Those are not threats to values, they are foundations of healthy relationships. Now let's address the elephant in the room: values, faith, and education. Many people worry that teaching accurate sex education conflicts with religious or moral beliefs. But here's the truth. Information does not dictate behavior. Beliefs guide behavior, but information guides safety. You can teach abstinence as a personal or religious choice while still explaining how reproduction works. You can promote committed relationships while still explaining anatomy and biology. These things are not opposites. In fact, when education aligns with honesty, it strengthens trust. Young people are far more likely to listen to guidance when they believe they're being told the whole truth. When they discover later that crucial information was withheld, trust breaks. And once trust breaks, guidance loses its power. Let's reframe this completely. Sex education is not about sex. It's about bodies. It's about health. It's about autonomy. It's about preventing harm. It's about replacing fear with understanding. When people know how pregnancy actually happens, clearly, calmly, without shame, they stop fearing mystery and start making informed decisions. That knowledge doesn't rush anyone into adulthood. It gives them tools for when adulthood arrives. Here's what responsible, health-centered sex education includes. It explains anatomy accurately using proper names. It explains how pregnancy happens in a clear, factual way. It explains that pregnancy does not happen by accident, fate, or moral worth. It explains prevention, not as encouragement, but as information. It explains that bodies are normal, not shameful. And it explains that questions are allowed. Most importantly, it explains that your body belongs to you. Let me be very clear about something. Avoiding accurate education does not delay sexual activity. Research has shown this repeatedly. What it does delay is safety, communication, and preparedness. People don't make better choices because they know less. They make better choices because they understand consequences. And understanding is never dangerous. So if you're a parent, an educator, a content creator, or simply someone who grew up confused and anxious about their body, here's the takeaway I want you to remember. Clarity is kindness, education is protection, and truth does not corrupt, it empowers. You can honor values and still teach biology. You can protect innocence without creating fear. And you can prepare people for life without pushing them into it. If this conversation resonated with you, if it helped you rethink what education really means, then you're not alone. These conversations matter. They change lives quietly, over time, through understanding. And if you believe health education should be honest, compassionate, and complete, then keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep sharing accurate information. Because everyone deserves to understand their own body without fear, without shame, and without confusion.